So to start with, I'm going to create a new project with this one here. Once we have a new project, make sure that we click on MacOS here, and then we make sure that it's an app. Once we've got those two, we're going to go ahead and give our product a name. I might just call this one numbers and words. One big thing to remember is we have to have an organization identifier. If we do not have one, we cannot progress. I've just gone and called it my last name .ac for applied computing. You can call this the same with your last name .ac or just AC. Either way will work. Big thing to remember as well is that our interface is going to be a storyboard. Our language is going to be Swift, and that we have none here if this is available, and we do not tick include tests. As we go into next, we can go ahead and we can save this somewhere. I'm just going to go ahead and save this in my applied computing folder. Here. Create. Excellent. So with that made now, we can go ahead and we can have a look through our files here on the side. I'll just maximize this and make this a bit bigger. So with these on the side, we have our main.storyboard. This is going to be our main view where we are able to make our application window and put everything inside of it. So coming down to this one here, first of all, we need to add some labels in here. So using this plus at the top here, I'm going to add in a label. I can now just click this and drag this in here. I'm just going to go ahead, I might name this first name. Now with this one here, I can just click it. I can go Command C, Command V to paste a new one, and I'll just call this one last name. So I'm just going to go ahead and just copy and paste these over here as well, and call this number 1 and number 2. Now with our labels here, I'm going to go ahead and just add a couple more things through the library. Again, at the top here, I'm going to go ahead and add a text field there and insert this one here. I'm going to do the same thing using Command C, Command V, and just paste and move these around as well. Another thing you can do is you can hold down the Option button and you can drag, and that will automatically copy and paste it for you and duplicate it like so. Now with these here, I want to add a couple more things. I'm going to add a button on the side here. I'm going to call this one join, and I will create a new one and add here. Now that we've got these here, we have an ability for people to input using these text boxes. We have the ability for people to push a button for an action to happen. Final thing we need to do is I want to get two more labels in here to the side. So one more here and one more to the side. Difference is with these labels is I want to modify them so that way they have the ability to change how they look and how they will be presented. So clicking on this one here, I'm going to go to this at the top to show my inspector. Once I click on this one, I can get, using this in the middle here, I can show attributes. These attributes are going to let me change how this appears and how it looks. So I can change how it's aligned. I'm going to align that in the center. I'm going to put a border box around it using this one. Make that a little bit bigger here as well. So with this one here, I can change my text color. With this one here, and I can go ahead and change my font as well. Change that there and have that green. I can do the same with this one over here. Could extend that out a little bit to make it a bit bigger. Draw a border around it, make it center, and I might change this color to be, might make it blue. Excellent. So now that I've got these two here, I have to go ahead, I have to code these together now. So since we have exactly how our view is going to look, what we have to do is we have to create a new pane that we can work from. So clicking this one at the top here in the corner, we can add a new window. And with this new window, we can now go ahead and we can open up a brand new viewController on the side. So this is going to give us all of our code. And on the other side, we can have our view open. To make it a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and simply just close this so I can read my code a little bit easier and I can see things a little bit more. So holding down Control, I'm going to now drag this one in over here like so. This is going to let me interact with it or to take information to it or give information to it now. These text fields, I need to make sure that they're outlets. So that way I'm able to give and take information from them, but if I interact with them, they're not going to do or give any actions, or they're not going to do any code if I touch or interact with them. Following my Hungarian notation, I'm going to call this txt, and I'll call this capital F, capital N, name, for first name, and connect. I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here, so it's a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to do the same thing with last name. So Control, drag in, make sure it's an outlet, and then T, X, T, L name. Here, number 1, txt, call this num1, and then here, txt, num2. To make sure I can really keep track of all the things I have, I'm going to add a comment in the top, double forward slash, and I'm going to write that these are going to be my inputs. My inputs are basically going to be anything that a user can put in, and it's going to have some kind of data taken from it. So in this case, it's going to be either a first name or a last name or some numbers to add together. I'm now going to go ahead and add these labels in, like so. I'm going to use the prefix LBL for label, and I'll just call this LBL joined. With another one here for LBL summed. Seeing as these aren't going to take values, they're going to receive values. So I'm going to call this an output. So anything is going to be taken from here is going to be output to here. I might just do one more thing just to make sure that these don't come up and say label yet. I might just get rid of these here. Perfect. Now at this point, we need to do something with our buttons. So what we're going to do is I'm going to drag these in the same way I have done so before. Instead of an outlet, however, we need to make sure that this one here is given as an action. An action is going to allow us that when we interact with this button, that it has the ability to run some code. So it's going to be a function, meaning that everything contained in it is going to run once it's interacted with. I'm going to call this one btn join, like so, and connect. When we have btn join, you'll see that it looks a bit different to these ones here. You'll see, first of all, it has these two brackets here. So these two brackets are basically just saying that for this button join, whenever it runs, I want you to do everything inside of these two brackets. So run code here. As long as it's between these two brackets, which if you get lost as you start creating a lot of different brackets and a lot of different pairs, you can double click on this bracket and they'll show you all the code that's going to run for this function here for this button. With this one now, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to say what this button needs to do. What I want this button to do is I want this button to, as a function, to join two names together from the given text fields. The way I can read and know exactly what this is going to do. As opposed to that, I'm going to add this one in now. Same thing, make sure it's an action, called btn add, and I'm going to say this is going to be a function that's going to add together two different numbers given from the text fields. So now that I have all my inputs, now that I've given my outputs, now that I've got my buttons here, I can go ahead, I'm just going to go and close this window here. So it's a little bit easier for me to read. Generally, it makes everything a lot easier to program and to code for if you're able to have a larger screen and able to really read the text that you're going through. Plus, it's really easy to go through and catch if you have any syntax errors, meaning that you've mistyped something, or you've had a capital letter in the wrong place, or you've just had a couple of spelling errors. So, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a constant. This constant is basically just going to say, I need to store the data that is coming from my text field here. So I'm going to call this first name. So I'm saying that this is going to be a constant using the let here. First name. I'm going to use my colon to mean that I want it to be a certain type. And I'm going to say I want it to be a string. I'm going to say that this first name, that's a constant, is a data type string. And that is simply going to equal to my txt first name dot string value. I can do the same thing for last name. I'm going to say let last name, give it as a string, equal to txt l name dot string value. Now with these next two, as they're going to be numbers added together, it's going to be a different process we'll get through in just a moment. So now that I've declared these two here, I need to do something with them. I am going to go ahead and I'm just going to make a new variable. So this variable means that I can change this at another time. So I might just make a variable for now, and I'm going to call it variable full name as a string. I'm going to make that equal to first name plus last name. And this is basically just going to add them both together as one full string. However, if we do that, the biggest problem is when we add these two together, if I were to enter my first name as Michael, my last name as Robertson, it's just going to come up looking like this in one big heap. And that's not what we want. What we can do instead is we can do this. So there's two approaches we can do here. We can either wrap this up in talking marks, and then we can use a backslash and then wrap this up in brackets. This is basically saying, hey, I want you to make everything in here type out exactly what I want in the orange writing. However, for everything given in this backslash and the brackets, I want you to actually print what has been given here. So this instead is going to show like this. Michael, comma, space. Like so. So now that we've got our value taken in, now that we've put them both together, we can go ahead and we can do this. I want to put them back to the label now. So I'm going to use my joint label. So using LBL joint, I need to say for that label, I want to change the string value that is given here. So I need to say that my joined label, the string for it is going to equal to full name, like so. Excellent. So now that we've got this one here to join two things together, what I want to do is I want to have something that will add two numbers together. So in the same way that we've done so up above here, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make a constant, meaning that it can't be changed. I might just call this one num1. Actually, just to make sure I'm consistent, I'll use lettering like this. Instead of a string, however, I need to go ahead and I need to change this into a different value. I want to make this an int, short for integer. So an integer value just means that I can go ahead and I can do maths and I can do other forms of arithmetic with it, rather than coming up as a string, which just shows exactly as text. For this here, I need to take this from my text for num1 and that string value 2. When I do so, however, this comes up with this message. So saying cannot convert value of type string to specified type int. So what this is saying is it's expecting it to be an integer as a number, but when I type something in, it's giving it a string value. So what I need to do is I need to do a typecast. I just basically need to say, hey, I know we're getting a string value here, but can you please turn that into an integer as soon as you get that? So that way I can have this as a number here. Swift, however, is very smart and is very strict. It's going to say here, sure, we can turn that into an integer for you, but what happens if you put in a letter A? Or what happens if you put in something else that isn't a whole number? It is going to break. So what we can do instead is we can push this one here. So we can push this red, we can push this red one here. And we can click on this one here, saying force unwrap using exclamation mark. So we can go ahead and fix that. And basically that's just going to say, I know at this point that someone could put something else in that isn't just an integer, but that's okay. If it happens, it's just going to break and we're fine with that. So now that we have our num1 as an integer, we've taken from the value that someone's put in and we've turned that into an integer so it can be calculated. We're just going to go ahead and just do that one again. Num2 int equals int for txt num2 dot string value. So now that I've got these two here, if for an example I have this as a 2 and I have this value as a 3, then what I can do here is I can go ahead and make a variable, and I'm going to call this summed. Also want to make this an int. At this point here, I can simply just do basic maths. I can just say that num1 plus num2. And this is just going to add them both together. So we're just saying that the summed variable as an integer is just going to literally equal this one plus this one together. As they're both ints, we can go ahead and we can just add those two together. If I want to use multiplication, I can use asterisks. If I wanted to divide them by one another, I can use /. If I want to minus them, I can just use minus instead. So, at this point here, now that I've gone and I've added them both together, I can use LBL for my label, sum.string value, and I'm going to equal that to summed. It's going to yell at me in a second, and it's going to say the same thing we had up here. It's going to say, hey, I'm expecting a string value. I need a string here, but you're giving me an integer. So, at this point here, we just need to say, oh, okay, if you're expecting a string, I'm just going to wrap you up, and I'm now just going to call you a string instead. So, at this point here, we've taken our inputs from our 4 text fields. We've got our 2 outputs for our label joined and label sum. We have our button here. In between these 2 brackets, we're saying that our button is going to make a variable as a string. I'm going to make that a first name. It's going to make a variable as a last name, taken from that text box as a string. We're going to make a new variable that's going to put them both together, and then we're going to put it back to the joined label. This button here, everything between these 2 brackets, we're going to have our num1 taken from our text field that we've made into an integer. We're going to have num2 that we've taken from the other text field, made as an integer. And we're going to sum them both together by saying the first number plus the second number. At this point, once we've added them both together, we're going to have this label string value, and that's going to equal to the number we've just added together after we turn it into a string. So we can run this now, and once it builds at the top here, it will attach, open anyway, and then we should be able to go back to our main screen where it is going to be running here. Once it's running, I can put in a name, put the other one in here, and press join, and this will come up with Michael, Robertson. I can put a number in here as 3, put a number in here as 5, push add, and I can see that's added together as 8.